One is heavily integrated vis-a-vis the single currency. And then a couple of thoughts on the future of economic and monetary union, specifically as relates to Brexit. So I just have a couple of charts up there that are coming from some recent reports from the European Commission. The first one is on the real GDP of the euro area, its growth rate, and you can see that it is seemingly on a nice trajectory upwards, which is very welcome news after the crisis that lasted for many years. And the second graph is on the inflation. So you can go and see in the last couple of years, the Eurozone has been flirting with a prospect of deflation, which was considered very damaging to the economy. And now we also seem to be on an upward tick, still not quite at the goal of 2%, you know, that nice sweet spot of just below 2%, but nevertheless, it does seem to be moving upward. And then we can go and see the real GDP per capita of the Eurozone versus the UK and the United States. And you can see that the Eurozone is looking pretty good. And this is also for the first time in years that when you're looking at the three areas for comparison, that the Eurozone is making, you know, a nicer impression than the United Kingdom and the United States. And so there's been a lot of celebration within the European Union and the Eurozone for this positive looking economic outlook. And moreover, the debt burden finally seems to be falling as well in the Eurozone as a result of many years in crisis, including the austerity programs that were implemented by the program countries. There are some remaining issues, however. This doesn't mean that everything is puppies and rainbows for the Eurozone. So we can go and see, for example, that we have the continuation of what's called the bank sovereign link. And this is one of the things that had pushed the European Union towards banking union, that weak banks were dragging down their sovereigns, and weak sovereigns were also dragging down their banks, that had resulted in a vicious circle. And the banking union was supposed to go and get the European Union out of this vicious circle. However, once the pressure had alleviated by markets on the Eurozone countries started backing away very, very quickly from some of the initial promises in June 2012. And now there is a common recognition that that bank sovereign link still exists. We're not in the hot part of the crisis, but there is still quite a bit of vulnerability in the Eurozone financial system. Moreover, although growth seems to have resumed, we have stubborn unemployment, very high unemployment in some of the European member states. And of course, we have Brexit that is looming in the background. So now some future ideas. So as I mentioned at the start, the Brexit had also helped prompt a discussion on where does the European Union go from here, and especially where does the Eurozone go from here. And there are a couple of ideas I just want to go and put out there before discussing the specifics. And one is the future of Europe and the future of the Eurozone going to be an intergovernmental one, or is it going to be one that is based on supranational institutions and the community method as it's been known? And so there has been a lot of talk about how the handling of the crisis and the crisis years had weakened the influence of institutions like the European Commission, and that perhaps governance has taken on a quite intergovernmental tone. And part of this was out of necessity, because changes might result in treaty changes, which would then be a very long extended process. So it was easier to go and devise intergovernmental solutions, such as the European Stability Mechanism, an intergovernmental solution, for example, or the Euro Plus Pact, intergovernmental, the Fiscal Compact, intergovernmental. And so is this going to continue, or is that only something that happened because of the crisis? And then we also have the long-standing debate on the prospect of risk sharing. So are we going to go and have some more solidarity and sharing of risk across the member states? Or are we going to be really firm on avoiding moral hazard? And by having some sort of mechanism in place to help rescue member states or banks, that this might encourage bad behavior. So these are some of the debates that are outlining the potential future of the Eurozone. So one prospect that has gotten a lot of attention, and there's supposed to be a formal proposal on this next week, is a European Monetary Fund. And so reports are that this would be a transformation of the current European stability mechanism, and a lot of the current setup will still be in place. You will still need unanimity for most of the important decisions like raising capital and bailout. So that continues the intergovernmental tone of Euro area governance. They would also have the possibility of managing the future anti-crisis budget, and they're able to go and borrow from markets. And so we can go and see, however, that the devil can be in the details when it comes to how this is actually going to work, because some of the proposals for the European Monetary Fund overlap with the current duties of the European Commission. And so, for example, would the Commission still be in charge of surveillance? Would it still have responsibility for crisis management? That's what it's been doing so far. Would that then be gutted, that part of the duties of the European Commission, and given to the ESM? Moreover, there's also been talk that the ESM should be able to engage in debt restructuring very quickly, which is a no-go for some of the member states, like France. And Wolfgang Schäuble also had presented the possibility of linking policy coordination in the country-specific recommendation with cohesion policy and the EU budget being managed by this European Monetary Fund. So depending which version you go with, this EMF could be a very souped-up European stability mechanism that's very intergovernmental and in line with a lot of German preferences. Or you can go and see another vision where it is really, a more of a supranational institution. Then we can go and, on a related note, the Euro area budget. So Emmanuel Macron had said in his speech earlier this year, this budget's resources must reflect its ambition. And the expected proposal in December next week is that it'll be 500 billion euros with the possibility of growing up to 20%. So it's basically the same budget as the European Stability Mechanism. But what do you do with this budget? That then becomes the next question. So some of the competing visions, can it engage in counter-cyclical policies? Is it going to be that, or is it really going to be used for only crises? Is this going to be coming from new money? Is this going to go and be a rainy day fund, which is what Klaus Regling, the current managing director, has advocated of the European Stability Mechanism? So all of these can still be defined. And then we have the prospect of a Euro area finance minister, which featured prominently in the Five Presidents report, as well as the other previous reports on four presidents and the Commission proposals. And so as Jean-Claude Juncker had said in his State of the Union, Commissioner for Economic and Financial Affairs, ideally also a vice president, should assume the role of economy and finance minister. He should also preside the Euro group. So that would be a merger of the commissioner as well as the Euro group president. And in Juncker's mind, it was clearly the commissioner that was taking over the role of the Eurogroup. However, it has been pointed out by Herman Van Rompuy, the former president of the European Council, that it could also go the other way, that it could be the Eurogroup president that takes on the duties of the Commission. Another idea is that this would also help consolidate Euro area representation internationally, in the International Monetary Fund, as well as at the G20. And then the topic that we had gone over briefly yesterday was Euro area enlargement. And Juncker had emphasized that the euro is meant to be the single currency of the European Union as a whole. And they're expected next week to also introduce a Euro area accession instrument. This is something that has a long precedent when it comes to exchange rate cooperation in Europe. There were similar instruments during the European monetary system, for example, and even the cohesion funds in the 1990s were supposed to help countries prepare for the adoption of the euro. But then there's a question, well, are they really ready? They might be ready in terms of the Maastricht Treaty convergence criteria, but then that's a different question whether that was really the best criteria to be evaluating potential member states. And what would be the benefits of having these countries, and what would their benefits be for being part of the euro area? Would it outweigh any of these potential risks? And so now just a couple of words on Brexit and economic and monetary union. And so some of the ways that Brexit is going to influence economic and monetary union is, first of all, it's going to change the economics of things, and secondly, it will change the alliances. So we can look at the budgetary shortfall that's been estimated from anywhere between 10 billion euros to 60 billion euros. Now it seems like they are settling on a more reasonable number, so it's probably not going to be the 60 billion euro shortfall, but nevertheless, in the long term, without these contributions, the European Union will be poorer. As well as, the United Kingdom, if you believe all of the estimations on what the economic effect of Brexit will be. So this will also have implications for the kind of budget and any potential counter-cyclical policy that the EU would be able to engage in. And then we have the prospect of financial union, the completion of banking union, the continuation of capital markets union. Once you have Brexit, on the one hand, it potentially opens up opportunities for existing member states. And you've seen Paris and you've seen Frankfurt just jump on the idea of taking over the clearinghouses from London, for example. So it presents some opportunities. On the other hand, it also presents the loss of the champion of liberalization within the European Union that had led that coalition in international financial negotiations. And so the vision of countries like the Scandinavian countries and the UK was much more liberal than the vision of countries like Germany and France. And so that direction is also probably going to go and look different. And then finally, the rather obvious point, but something that is really important and has long-standing ramifications, is the loss of the Euro out champion. So as was mentioned in yesterday's presentation, 85% of the EU GDP is in the Eurozone. So the Euro outs are now composed of relatively small member states. They are not going to be so important economically, and the champion that made sure that their rights, their interests were not trampled upon is leaving. So for example, when we have financial integration during the crisis, it was the UK that was making sure that the Euro outs did not lose out as a result of the single supervisory mechanism, and had altered the voting in the European Banking Authority. Well, once the UK is out, who is going to go and take over that role? Can that role be taken over? So you can imagine a widening gulf between the Euro ins and the Euro outs, and despite the domestic politics that would caution against Euro adoption, there'll be increasing pressure to go and do so. And the Euro in, Euro out question also has implications for the deepening of economic and monetary union and the strengthening of banking union. This banking union is not a European Union program, but it is a Euro area program. And so I'll go and stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I think that really keeps the space for a lot of time, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of provocative questions. Again, in the context of yesterday, and exactly what I think the provocation that we started with the Bulgarian Vice PM, and one of the big questions, is whether, adoption of the euro and how we stand and what is the views of ins and outs. I think this is the time, actually to be asked. By having so, I'm going to ask Professor Shevegeva to address us all. Continue the topic. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, chers collègues, Mesdames et Messieurs, je vous prie de m'excuser, mais je continue en français. Alors, la diversité des langues en Union européenne, c'est règle. Voilà pourquoi, comme comité francophone de Bulgarie, et dans notre département de sciences politiques à Nouvelle-Université de Bulgarie, alors je préfère parler en français. Voilà pourquoi, encore une fois, je vous prie de m'excuser. Alors, je remercie à Michel parce qu'elle a fait une présentation très claire, très directe, très économiste. Alors, voilà pourquoi j'ai presque la même présentation. Quel est l'avenir pour la zone euro? Alors, je vous prie de me donner ça. Parce que. Ah, voilà. Bon. Quel avenir pour la zone euro? Alors, je préfère faire un résumé en bref parce que beaucoup de questions, ils sont posées dans votre présentation. Voilà pourquoi je commence avec quels sont les défis auxquels notre union doit répondre. J'ai marqué 3 grandes lignes. Alors, la première, c'est que l'union n'est plus autant synonyme de progrès que le passé. Alors, ici, je pense surtout dans la situation économique. Alors, est-ce qu'il y a une croissance économique qui est partagée parmi tous les pays membres de l'Union économique et monétaire? Bien sûr que non. Parce que si on respecte les chiffres, les chiffres officiels, etc., on voit qu'il y a une grande différence, il y a une divergence dans cette région du monde, dans cette région européenne. Alors, le deuxième, est-ce que l'euro n'a pas été un facteur de convergence entre ses membres, ni au sein de ses membres? Alors, si on partage les chiffres, par exemple, entre l'Espagne, entre l'Italie, entre l'Allemagne, on voit de très grandes différences parmi les indicateurs macroéconomiques principaux. Voilà pourquoi, qu'est-ce qu'on pense maintenant? Alors, je pose des questions qui sont vraiment très, très discutables. Alors, voilà pourquoi on n'a pas trouvé de solution. Il faut le trouver parmi les chercheurs, parmi les professeurs académiques, parmi les experts. Alors, moi, comme représentant d'un pays qui n'est pas membre de l'Union, de la zone euro et de l'Union monétaire, alors voilà pourquoi, pour moi, vraiment, c'est très, très intéressant d'écouter les opinions et la discussion de cette journée. Parce que chez nous, il y a une vraie discussion parmi les chercheurs, parmi le monde académique. Qu'est-ce qu'on doit faire? Alors, est-ce que la Bulgarie doit proposer sa candidature de IRM2 pour faire quelque chose avec la situation macroéconomique, avec la convergence économique de notre pays avec les autres pays membres de l'Union économique et monétaire, etc., etc. C'est une discussion qui est vraiment à très haut niveau, mais aussi parmi les experts. On n'a pas trouvé les solutions. Voilà pourquoi on regarde la situation qui est proposée parmi les experts de la zone euro. Voilà pourquoi je remercie de cette conférence parce qu'elle pose beaucoup de questions. Beaucoup de questions sans réponse pour le moment. Alors la troisième grande ligne, c'est la montée des populismes et le sceptiques en Europe. C'est réel. Voilà. Quelles sont les sources? Quelles sont les racines? Et surtout, bien sûr, économiques. Alors, parce que les élections en Autriche, en Allemagne, en Belgique, non, en Hollande, aux Pays-Bas, etc., on voit une augmentation de cette partie non populaire, mais en même temps avec une influence politique et économique dans les différents pays européens. Après, je continue avec le deuxième slide. Face à ces fragilités très profondes, quelle réponse peut-on envisager? Quelle perspective est-il possible de tracer? Alors, comme conclusion, en premier lieu, il faut également répondre à la demande de protection dans le champ économique. Ici, je ne parle pas de protectionnisme. Je parle qu'on doit utiliser très bien la situation dans le monde, dans le processus de la mondialisation. Ce n'est pas le protectionnisme, c'est-à-dire que l'Europe doit faire sa présentation dans l'économie mondiale plus active avec libre circulation des marchés, des capitaux, etc., etc. Mais il faut bien connaître quelles sont les sources, quels sont les facteurs de croissance économique, peut-être. C'est le capital humain. Qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire pour avoir une capital humain très très motivée, très innovative, etc., etc. Peut-être les sources financières. C'est-à-dire il faut orienter les sources financières vers la restructuration de l'économie européenne pour être plus compétitive, plus innovative dans le monde. Parce qu'en même temps, il faut bien comprendre et respecter que l'Union européenne, c'est l'un des facteurs de l'économie mondiale. Au second lieu, il faut remédier au défaut de l'architecture institutionnelle de la zone euro qui est le cœur économique de l'Europe. Michel a parlé de ça. Alors, au troisième lieu, nous devons mieux répondre à l'exigence de démocratisation des décisions européennes. Alors, plus une grande transparence. Il faut avoir une grande transparence alors, de toutes les institutions européennes, la Commission européenne, le Parlement européen, etc., etc., mais la transparence dans la vie active de tous les pays membres. Ah oui, mais la Banque centrale, c'est un cas spécifique plus ou moins, parce que la Banque centrale, alors, la Banque centrale européenne, alors, elle joue un rôle plus ou moins plus strict de la part de la politique monétaire, et de la part de masse monétaire, la vitesse masse monétaire, etc., et tous les problèmes de la zone euro. Voilà pourquoi je pense qu'ici, je respecte les autres institutions européennes, c'est-à-dire la Commission, le Parlement, etc., qui sont les institutions qui sont orientées plus ou moins vers le secteur économique. Je continue avec le troisième slide. Alors, quelques mots de commissaire Pierre Moscovici. J'espère bien que vous connaissez parfaitement le dernier rapport de la Commission qui est orienté vers la situation macroéconomique de tous les pays membres, y compris bien sûr, moi c'était le mois d'octobre, alors c'était les chiffres statistiques du mois d'octobre de cette année. Alors voilà, cette croissance devrait rester constante selon les prévisions des experts. Alors, quelques mots seulement en bref, avec les indicateurs macroéconomiques, parce que Michel a présenté presque tout, mais alors je donne un point de vue plus politique, plus orienté vers la science politique, vers une discussion qui n'est pas seulement une discussion économique. Alors, une croissance du PIB, bien sûr, après la crise, il y a une croissance économique. Nous parfaitement, les experts, nous connaissons les chiffres pour 2017, les prévisions pour 2018, etc., etc. Alors, taux de chômage, oui, bien sûr, il y a une baisse, mais pas dans tous les pays membres de la zone euro. Alors, si on respecte les chiffres de l'Espagne, c'est notre collègue peut le dire, Ignacio, alors c'est un chiffre énorme, mais si on respecte la situation économique d'Allemagne, c'est une autre chose, ou bien dans les pays baltes, non, pays baltes, non, les pays Pays-Bas, voilà, les pays baltes, oui. Mais en même temps, pour les pays qui ne sont pas membres de la zone euro, alors il y a plus ou moins des indicateurs macroéconomiques très, très favorables. Par exemple, je ne sais pas si parmi nous il y a les représentants de la Pologne, mais la Pologne, pour 2017-2018, alors c'est une croissance de presque 4,5%. Alors, croissance du PIB, il y a un taux de chômage presque 5,5%. Ou bien, par exemple, la République tchèque, la Roumanie, la Bulgarie, bien sûr, après il y a une image pour tous les pays membres de l'Union européenne, mais alors la situation est complètement différente. Alors, voilà pourquoi, même pour les pays membres de la zone euro, même pour les autres pays qui ne sont pas membres de l'Union économique et monétaire, voilà, il y a une différence entre les situations sociales, politiques, économiques, et ça dépend de beaucoup de choses. Quand on parle de taux de chômage, il faut bien sûr constater que le chômage continue de diminuer, mais la main-d'œuvre reste sous-utilisée. Sous-utilisée dans notre pays, je pense que sous-utilisée dans les autres pays, c'est peut-être une question que vous pouvez le poser de cette discussion. Alors, l'inflation, bien sûr, il y a une augmentation, après de longues années d'inflation, etc. Le taux de déficit public, et le taux d'endettement. Alors, c'est une question vraiment très, disons comme ça, dure pour les économistes de la zone euro, parce que là, la situation est aussi complètement différente et on ne peut pas faire une conclusion que, bien sûr, il y a une taux d'endettement en général de 85%, mais ce n'est pas le cas, parce que si on respecte les critères de Maastricht, alors ça c'est 60% par rapport au PIB. Oui, 60%. Voilà une image. Alors, où une image que vous pouvez voir le GDP, alors produit intérieur brut, alors une augmentation de 4% plus 4-5% pour la Pologne, pour la République tchèque, pour entre 3 et 4% pour la l'Italie, la Roumanie, etc., etc. Et pour la zone euro, c'est presque 1,8, 1,2, 1,9, etc. Alors, cette image montre qu'il y a une divergence, il y a un problème. Et voilà pourquoi, alors ici, vous pouvez respecter la légende. Alors, comme vous voyez, alors, en bref, un tableau, parce que je parlais que l'Union européenne c'est l'un des grands acteurs économiques dans l'économie mondiale. Voilà en bref, quelle est la situation dans l'Union européenne, y compris bien sûr la Grande-Bretagne, alors en Allemagne, en France, en Italie. Alors c'est un nouveau pays membre avec 4% pour 2007. Ce sont des nouveaux pays membres depuis 2007. C'est-à-dire, alors, ici, la Slovaquie, la Slovénie, etc., alors, ils sont membres de l'Union économique et monétaire, mais les autres qui ne sont pas membres de la zone euro. Comme vous voyez, la Chine, le monde, les États-Unis, c'est-à-dire un panorama vraiment très très bref, mais on doit respecter les chiffres. Voilà pourquoi il faut faire quelque chose pour stimuler l'économie européenne pour être, alors je répète pour la deuxième fois, plus compétitive, plus innovative, avec une structure productive, c'est-à-dire une structure avec des branches de valeur ajoutée. Et voilà. Avec ça, je termine. Alors, Michel a proposé dans cette présentation alors, quelques grandes lignes. Voilà, la gouvernance économique de la zone euro. Voilà pourquoi moi aussi alors je propose qu'il faut compléter l'union bancaire et l'union de marché de capitaux. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on fait avec l'union financière? C'est Michel dans la présentation qu'on a parlé de cette question. Alors, la convergence et la transparence, une architecture institutionnelle qui permet de définir et de garantir l'intérêt général de la zone euro, c'est-à-dire ministre de la Finance de la zone euro. Est-ce que c'est possible? Est-ce que non? Et qu'est-ce que nous montre ça? Et après, le budget. On connaît parfaitement la structure, les principes, etc. du budget européen, mais ici on parle d'un budget qui est orienté surtout vers le zone euro. Et comme vous voyez, l'approfondissement de l'union économique et monétaire et dernièrement, l'approfondissement devra marquer un retour à plus de discipline de marché dans le système. Voilà pourquoi je vous remercie beaucoup de votre attention. Alors, j'attends les questions.
Merci. Thank you. See, that's the hard part, you know, especially when I, excuse me, because I couldn't follow the French and I was asking, you know, from the help, but, you know, now we are, you know, with diversity. Now I'm going to open the round for questions. And as immediately as I do have raised hands, so let's start on this side and we go further on. Yes, sir.
Okay, yes, a very, very fast question. I may as well, thank you for the two presentations, but I made some more reference to democratic control, in particular, because you mentioned that the minister for the Eurozone has to be accountable to the European Parliament, without any reference to national parliament, by the way. But as Macron has also mentioned the possibility of a parliament for the Eurozone, I would like to know if you can develop how, in your opinion, the strengthening of democratic accountability and legitimacy has to be done. And the combination European Parliament, National Parliament, or perhaps a new Parliament for this.
Thank you very much. Probably we should gather one or two questions, or we want to, yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Well, in fact, thank you very much for the two presentations. We're very consistent because they are covering the same subject matter indeed. Michel, you explained very well the controversy between intergovernmental and supranational. I wanted to know your opinion about it. I mean, what is the logic? I mean, you argued supranational procedure takes a lot more time. I doubt that. I mean, to the extent there is a political will, of course, in both cases you need not only the approval of all governments, but all democratically confirmed by national parliament. Both cases, that's the same procedure. On the contrary, I think the logic is to build further on the objectives embedded in the treaty, to create a new kind of context, which allows us to once and for all to change, to amend the treaty, and further on to implement these steps. It's much more easy, and I think it's the logic of the EMU which we have created and embedded in the market to continue in following the supranational path. And with regard to the other question, je voudrais vous demander, parce que vous avez signalé qu'il y a un progrès assez important pour ce qui concerne les pays non membres, hein, le 4%, c'est bon. Qu'est-ce qu'il a manqué juste ici? Pour moi, je crois quand on se concentre sur les succès de l'Union économique et monétaire, on a développé le M, mais on a manqué de développer le E, c'est-à-dire approximation de législation, de politique. Est-ce que vous êtes d'accord sur ce point? Qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire alors pour améliorer la situation?
There is one more question over there, and then we'll take the first round of answer, and then we'll go back to the
So, both presentation have rightly stressed this need to complete the institutional architecture of the Eurozone, and particularly the completion of the banking union is a key strategic project. This would also call for the establishment of a substantial backstop for the resolution mechanism, but also a European common deposit guarantee. These are considered to be key measures to break the vicious circle. You alluded to this sovereign banks over the risk sharing, risk reduction dilemma. And now Germany and others are proposing to introduce new restrictive measures on the banking activity, particularly on their portfolio of state debt funds, bonds, and this is considered damaging. It's unclear, including Italy, because they can erode the banking lending capacity of banks. So, for instance, Draghi seems to be very much in favor of this measure. Was very clear in his declaration. So I would like to have your view, if it is possible to reach and how a compromise to solve this persistent dispute.
Thank you very much. At this point of time, I will start with Michelle.
Okay, so the first question on democratic legitimacy and the proposal of the European Parliament being the main method of accountability. This is something that we already have in various aspects of the Euro area. So, for example, the European Central Bank is supposedly accountable to the European Parliament, but it is a relatively weak accountability. And I would say that on the one hand, there's really no appetite for boosting the European Parliament's accountability tools in that area from a political standpoint. There's also the issue of European Parliament versus a Euro area European Parliament, and splitting the Euro ins versus outs even further. That said, I have co-written a paper with Dermot Hodgson on a proposal for a Eurozone subcommittee within the European Parliament. And so I'd be happy to send you a copy of that if you're interested in reading more about it. But we presented this to the European Parliament, and they also said that it's probably not going to happen. Yeah. But anyway. The second question on the logic of intergovernmentalism versus supranationalism and the objectives embedded in the treaty, I would argue that it's actually not as that they were right that intergovernmentalism was faster. If you want to change the treaty, you have to have a referendum in some countries like Ireland that you could go and get around. When you have a treaty negotiation, then it's likely not going to stay limited to that specific issue area, that other people are going to want to go and blow this up. But that said, I don't think it's a great model. and I would rather not see this be a continuation beyond the crisis period. I do understand the logic that the politics of a treaty change would have potentially been too dragged out given how quickly they needed to go and respond to what was happening in financial markets. But I don't think it's a great model for the future. The completion of banking union, I would say that what would be the most likely way for some compromise to be found would only happen under severe market pressure. That is when Germany normally moves. But otherwise, they're in a really nice position of blocking everything. They set up, an economic and monetary union that suits their domestic institutions and interests very well. I would say that there is a positive to the restriction of the purchase of sovereign debt, in that it would help restore some of the market discipline that she had alluded to, that was gone for a long period of time. And it was, an artificial construct to go and treat sovereign debt as safe. Now that we know that it's not safe, from an and I'm not actually an economist for anyone that was wondering, but I do see the economic logic of limiting that.
Thank you, Michelle. Madame?
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. Alors, très bonne question. Je vous remercie, chers collègues. Alors, en bref, quels sont les problèmes pour améliorer la situation économique dans les différents types de pays, y compris bien sûr les pays qui sont hors de la zone euro? Voilà, il faut bien dire que les pays qui sont hors de la zone euro, ce sont des pays moins avancés dans l'Union européenne. Voilà pourquoi, si on connaît bien sûr la théorie économique classique et pas seulement classique, alors taux de croissance dans les pays qui sont moins avancés sont bien sûr plus bien. Alors, à mon avis, et c'est mon opinion personnelle, alors, il y a trois grandes lignes pour améliorer la situation économique dans nos pays. Premièrement, il faut proposer une politique macroéconomique adéquate. Par exemple, en Bulgarie. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il faut dire que le cas bulgare, c'est un cas spécifique. L'économie bulgare et la situation en Bulgarie d'après 1997, oui, nous sommes dans une politique de currency bond, du comité monétaire. Voilà pourquoi notre pays est surveillé par le Fonds monétaire international et après 2007 par la Banque centrale européenne. C'est-à-dire les autorités bulgares, alors, qui sont orientées vers la politique économique, il faut respecter toutes les règles de Banque centrale européenne et de toutes les institutions européennes. Parce que maintenant, la surveillance est de Banque centrale européenne, parce que le taux de change de notre monnaie nationale est lié avec l'euro, avec la monnaie européenne. Voilà pourquoi, pour proposer cette politique macroéconomique adéquate qui respecte les règles européennes, mais surtout les règles de notre pays, alors cette politique macroéconomique doit être orientée pour stimuler les branches industrielles qui sont à haute valeur ajoutée. C'est un grand problème, même pour la structure productive bulgare. Mais il faut le faire, parce que sinon, on doit rester pour longtemps, à moyen et à long terme, alors le plus pauvre pays de l'Union européenne. Et ce n'est pas notre cas. Et après, il faut trouver quels sont les facteurs de croissance économique. Les facteurs, y compris bulgares, c'est-à-dire la main-d'œuvre. Qu'est-ce qu'on doit faire avec cette main-d'œuvre? Bien sûr, elle doit être plus qualifiée, plus motivée, etc., etc. Mais chez nous, il y a un grand problème démographique. Voilà. Ou bien, quelles sont les sources financières? Parce que si vous respectez les derniers chiffres, vous pouvez voir, chiffres statistiques, vous pouvez voir qu'il y a une diminution des investissements étrangers directs. Ils sont diminués presque 5 ou bien 6%. Non, 2 fois. On a diminué 3 ou 4 fois par rapport, par exemple, à 2007. Alors, maintenant, c'est un vrai problème. Pourquoi les investissements étrangers directs sont hors de la Bulgarie? Si, par exemple, ici, il y a une situation politiquement et économiquement stable, il y a une politique surveillée par la Banque centrale européenne, etc., etc. Mais en même temps, pas de ressources financières pour l'économie bulgare. C'est-à-dire, c'est une grande question. Et dernièrement, il faut bien sûr, pour être très clair, alors il faut diminuer la corruption et la bureaucratie. Alors, chez nous, parmi nous, il y a un collègue qui est vraiment très alors attaché vers cette question de la corruption du GAP. Alors, mais c'est un vrai problème. Et j'espère bien que pas seulement dans notre pays. Mais en Bulgarie, il faut réfléchir de cette question. Qu'est-ce qu'on va faire avec la corruption et avec la bureaucratie? Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you. Can we go quickly because we have more questions? I would ask here, and I see Michael as well, who's been asking the. Right over here. Yeah, sure.
All right. So first, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Ivan Donet. I am a student at the Political Science Department in the New Bulgarian University. And today I want to play the devil's advocate. I want to provoke you with a thought that's amongst young people quite popular nowadays. We're losing trust in typical and traditional banking at an alarming rate. We don't trust banks anymore due to the financial crisis that happened in 2008, and that will keep occurring in the future. This is why a very creative person that goes by the name of Natanashi Sakamato, sorry if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, created a technology called blockchain. And he created a currency that will not be taxed, that has no middleman, and that will have no government. And this cryptocurrency is called Bitcoin. And this is becoming a more and more popular trend nowadays. And I just would like to hear your opinion on this trend, because we cannot keep pretending that it doesn't exist. It exists, and some banks are even calling it a safe haven, better than gold to invest in. So I would just like to hear your opinions on this thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please.
And just on the question of making the EMU better for future crises, like a lot of the reforms that you've discussed and that we discussed at the moment are in terms of deepening the monetary union integration, but as Economics 101 will tell us, that this kind of integration doesn't really work in isolation of other forms of integration, and there's not a lot of talk going on fiscal integration, which seems like it really is very far away from working or happening, and labour mobility within Europe, which is a very important way of dealing with convergence and unemployment that you've talked about. So, like for example, the European Monetary Fund, talking about a rainy day fund, that would likely just be money that will be used for transfers when it's too late, when the crisis is already basically undertaken, and not the kind of continual fiscal transfers that might prevent a crisis. So do you think that these reforms are possible in isolation without other types of integration in Europe?
Thank you very much. And then Michael?
Yes, thank you very much. In this respect, following up what Keane just said, in all the proposals presented, either by the European Commission, by the Parliament, or by the European Council now, I'm also missing a little bit the aspect of a point we raised yesterday of economic convergence and territorial convergence. How are we going to, what are the proposals on the table? Where are the lessons learned from the crisis we happen to more or less survive? How actually do these proposals take on board the lessons which you should have taken from these crises? And one of the aspects is clearly the economic and territorial convergence, differently put also by Keane. Another topic in this regard is, since we have a lot of experts, not so much on the EMU or on the European Central Bank, but a lot of experts surrounding common foreign security policy, defense issues. We do have a high representative for common foreign security policies, Mrs. Mogherini. We have the proposals on the table now for the EU to have a Minister of EU Affairs, of Euro Affairs. Is there anything that we can learn maybe from the exercise or from Mogherini's and also her predecessor job description for this new post of potentially having a Minister on EU Affairs? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. At this point in time, I believe probably Michelle. I'll take probably a little bit on the cryptocurrencies, if you will, and then the rest of the questions and the last remarks.
Okay, so in regard to the cryptocurrency question, I will admit that it's not something that I know an awful lot about. As far as the safeness of the European banking system, they have taken measures, including the national deposit insurance and that sort of thing, up to 100,000 euros, and that is something. As far as the cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, whether that is going to become more widespread, I don't know. I really don't. I wish that I had a better answer for you. The second question on the integration and isolation with fiscal integration, I would like to go and link that with Mikhail's question on economic convergence, that the issue is that when we talk about the crisis and the lessons that were learned, people learn very different lessons from that crisis. So for some people, the lesson was austerity was a really bad idea. And for other people, it was, no, austerity was a good idea, we just did it too soon. And so in the European Union, the lesson learned when it comes to fiscal policy was that consolidation was a good thing, and they doubled down on it. If you look at all of the reform proposals since then, it is a reinforcement of the original idea behind the Stability and Growth Pact. So there was no massive, EU-wide lesson learned that that was a mistake. And this is also why the question of a euro area budget and what it would do is probably not going to go very far. You do have advocates that say there should be a large euro area budget that has the power for counter-cyclical policies, but not everybody learned that lesson. Similarly, the lesson with other forms of economic convergence, for some the lesson was, well, we have the endurance of the varieties of capitalism and these different growth models despite the crisis. But for others, the lesson was, we weren't hard enough on them, and they should still try to be more like Germany. And so we're going to go and have new procedures, like the macroeconomic imbalances procedures, where countries are supposed to, theoretically be punished if you are in excessive deficit or surplus. But in practice, nobody ever gets in trouble for a surplus.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other requests for remarks, and since we will immediately go to the next panel, let's give a round of applause to our speakers. Thank you very much. At this point of time, I would like to invite the speakers, namely Professor Molina and Professor Donnelly, for the EU and Catalonia conundrum lesson learned and ways forward. Having said that, we have decided this section to start with a presentation from Professor Molina. There you go, sir. And we'll make it with intervention from my right side, from Brendan. And then we'll go on with a round of your questions and comments. Thank you very much. We should probably start on. You have it?
I have a presentation. I think it's faster because I didn't laptop.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, we're all set now.
Okay, do they need the microphone or the music? Okay, better. Yeah, sure. Well, I've been given around 15 minutes. Thank you for the university with the time to make a presentation, and then Brendan will make his presentation also discuss some of my points. Well. The idea is to give you some background information, but particularly from the European dimension of this crisis, considering to what extent some EU factors have encouraged the process, but at the same time the difficult relation between a secessionist state and EU membership because of the institutional and political factor that then, as both processes in Catalonia and Scotland go together, and this is one of the most important factors explaining the radicalization of the nationalist program in Catalonia and to become independent, following the announcement by the Scottish and the British government to have a referendum. So the parallel with Scotland. Then some latest development and the attempts of the Catalan regional government to internationalize the conflict in the last years, and finally some conclusion. Okay, so 15 minutes. Yeah, I know. No, but I will do it. Okay, First of all, well, as is happening in the case of other countries, Canada, Belgium, this is quite obvious, to some extent United Kingdom, where center-brief retention are quite complex in Spain. It's a permanent feature. Spain is interesting because you can contrast a very early state building in the 15th century, but a very late and troubled nation building in the 19th century with strong regional identities in the Basque Country and Catalonia competing. Well, nevertheless, Spain can be considered successful because national integrity has been preserved. Actually, the borders of Spain are the oldest in Europe, so it's the territorial integrity compared to any other European country it's remarkable. But with those regional or nation-building projects in the periphery competing with the Spanish nation-building. After transition to democracy in the 70s, well, regional self-government and decentralization was clearly connected to democracy. Some kind of federation, or federation in all Latin name, was created, the 17 regions. The constitution says that the demos is Spain as a whole, Spanish people, but also with guarantee that regions and nationalities, this is reference to nationalities in the constitution, have right to political autonomy, and Catalonia enjoys, well, extensive power. So it has been autonomous region since the early 80s. Well, because of immigration, particularly because of immigration, but also other factors during the second half of the 20th century, millions of people coming from other Spanish regions went to Catalonia in the process of industrialization. The truth is that even if Catalan language is widely used in Catalonia, 95% of people in Catalonia can use Catalan, the Spanish language is most used in everyday use. The Catalan nationalism, there is some perception that has been a tsunami in the last years of Catalan nationalism, but it's not the case. Catalan nationalism has been very, very stable since the very beginning of the democratic period. If you compare result of the Nationalist Party in regional election or within Catalonian Spanish general elections, it's more or less 50% of the vote in regional election every time, and more or less 1/3 in national elections. What happened is, well, until 2010 or until the the Catalan was rallied split into three thirds. No? Those who feel